The cold seeped through the thin glass of the living room window, a preview of the night to come outside. The wind had begun to howl, tearing at the last stubborn leaves clinging to the oak trees. Evelyn Shaw checked the ornate mantel clock for the 10th time in an hour. Daniel was late. Again, their 13th anniversary was tomorrow. She'd planned a quiet dinner, just the two of them. She'd even dug out the old photo album from their first year together. A foolish, sentimental gesture she now regretted. The lamb was slowly drying out in the oven. The candles had burned down to stubs. Her phone buzzed on the coffee table. A single image flashing on the screen sent from a blocked number. It was Daniel, and next to him, her hand tucked neatly into the crook of his elbow, was Isabella. Isabella from college. Isabella, his first and, Evelyn sometimes suspected, his last real love. They were walking through the gleaming, opulent lobby of the Regency Hotel. Smiling, Daniel was looking down at Isabella with a softness Evelyn hadn't seen in years. The world didn't tilt. It didn't shatter. It simply went very, very still and very, very cold. The noise of the wind faded. Her own heartbeat was a dull, distant thud in her ears. She picked up her phone, her fingers numb and clumsy, and dialed Daniel's number. It rang once, twice. Then, a young, impatient voice answered. Hello? It was their son, Leo. He was 13. Leo, is your father there? I need to speak with him. Her voice sounded strange to her own ears, flat and robotic. He's in a parent-teacher conference. He said no interruptions from outsiders. Leo recited, his tone cool, dismissive. It was the same tone Daniel used when dismissing a clumsy waiter. Leo, put him on now. The steel in her voice was new. No, don't call this number again. You're being disruptive. The line went dead. She called back immediately. A red notification flash, blocked. Evelyn sat there on the expensive velvet sofa, in the beautiful, cold, silent house that had never truly felt like a home. She looked at the dying fire, at the ruined meal, at the photograph of the three of them on the mantel, a smiling, perfect lie. The cold inside her spread, hardening something that had been soft and vulnerable for too long. The front door slammed shut hours later. Heavy footsteps echoed in the marble foyer. Daniel's voice, low and irritated, mixed with Leo's higher, complaining one. They entered the living room, a united front. Daniel's eyes swept over her, taking in her still form on the couch, the cold dinner visible through the dining room archway. His mouth tightened with displeasure. What is this, Evelyn? A protest? Leo said you were calling incessantly, causing a scene during his important meeting. I saw the picture, she said, her voice still devoid of emotion. The Regency, with Isabella. A flicker of something surprise, annoyance crossed his face, but it was quickly masked by arrogance. So, it was a business meeting. She's a valuable consultant. Must I report my every move to you? Leo stood beside his father, his young face a mirror of Daniel's contempt. You embarrassed me, calling like that. My teacher was talking about my future. Daniel nodded, as if Leo had spoken a profound truth. Your constant need for attention is exhausting, Evelyn. You're disrupting this family's harmony. There are consequences for that. Consequences? The word tasted like ash. Yes, Daniel said, his voice cold and final. You need to learn. Leo, the terrace doors. Evelyn stared, uncomprehending. As Leo marched to the wall of glass doors that led to the vast, exposed terrace overlooking the city, he unlocked one and slid it open. A gust of freezing wind ripped into the warm room, scattering papers from the desk. Outside, Daniel commanded, pointing to the terrace. A few hours of quiet reflection should help you remember your place. She didn't move. She couldn't process the sheer absurd cruelty of it. This was her house. She was his wife. Now, Evelyn, Daniel said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. Unless you want me to make it a month. Something in his eyes told her he was serious. This was the man she had married. This was the father of her child. The cold inside her became a shield. Wordlessly, she stood and walked towards the open door. Leo didn't look at her as she passed. She stepped out into the blistering cold. The door slid shut behind her with a definitive click. The lock engaged. The wind was a physical force, tearing at her clothes, her hair, stealing the breath from her lungs. She wrapped her arms around herself, but her thin cardigan was useless. Hours bled together in a shivering, painful blur. She paced to keep her blood moving, her teeth chattering uncontrollably. She watched the lights of the city, the warm, glowing windows of other lives, other homes where people might be loved. The cold seeped into her bones, into her soul. By the time the first gray light of dawn touched the horizon, Evelyn was no longer the woman she had been the night before. That woman had frozen to death on the terrace. When Daniel finally unlocked the door at 6 a.m., Evelyn stumbled inside, her body racked with shivers, her skin like ice. A fever was already igniting behind her eyes, making the room swim. Daniel surveyed her dispassionately. I trust you've had time to reconsider your behavior. She didn't answer. She walked past him, up the grand staircase, each step a monumental effort. In the bathroom, she ran a scalding hot shower and stood under the water until some feeling returned to her limbs. Her reflection in the steamed-up mirror was pale, with dark circles under her eyes. But those eyes themselves were different. They were clear, empty of the old hope, the old longing for his approval. She dressed in simple, warm clothes. The fever burned through her, but it felt clarifying. She went to her small home office, a room Daniel always called the glorified closet, and printed the document she had drafted weeks ago and hidden away in a drawer. Afraid of her own audacity, she picked up a pen. Down in his study, Daniel was already at his computer, the financial news flashing on a monitor. He didn't look up when she entered. She placed the single sheet of paper on the desk in front of him. The words at the top were bold and final. Petition for dissolution of marriage. He finished typing a sentence, then slowly lifted his gaze. He looked at the paper, then at her. He didn't seem surprised, only mildly annoyed, as if she'd brought him the wrong coffee order. He let her stand there for a full 40 minutes while he took a call, sipped his espresso, made notes. The fever made her dizzy. She held onto the back of a leather chair for support, her knuckles white. Finally, he deigned to speak. Evelyn, you spent a few hours getting some fresh air. Now you want a divorce? He chuckled, a dry, hollow sound. You were out of line. You were. Sign it, Daniel. He leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. Fine, if that's what you want. Leo's custody stays with me. I assume you have no objection. He said it like a challenge, expecting her to crumble, to immediately retract her demand at the threat of losing her son. She simply shook her head. No objection. His eyebrows raised a fraction. This was not following the script. To regain control, he pressed the intercom on his phone. Leo, come to the study. Leo arrived, his posture already mimicking his father's entitled slouch. He glanced at Evelyn without a flicker of concern for her obvious illness. Your mother, Daniel said the word with a faint sneer, has decided she wants a divorce. She's leaving. The question is, who do you want to live with? Leo didn't even hesitate. He looked directly at Evelyn, his expression a perfect copy of Daniel's cold dismissal. I'm a Shaw. I stay with the Shaws. A year ago, those words would have lanced through her heart. She would have wept alone in her room for nights, grieving the loss of a child who was still physically present but emotionally galaxies away. Now, after the long, freezing night, the words just landed and meant nothing. She felt nothing. The well of maternal love for this cold stranger of a boy was finally, utterly dry. She didn't look at him. She turned and left the study. In her bedroom, she packed. It was shockingly easy. 13 years of marriage, and her personal belongings fit into one large suitcase and a carry-on. The rest was just stuff, house stuff, family stuff, their stuff. She left it all. She wheeled her luggage down the hall. Daniel was in the living room now, watching the stock ticker on the massive television. Where are you going? I'll have Charles drive you, he said, not turning around. It wasn't kindness. It was about maintaining control, overseeing her exit. No, she said, her voice hoarse from the fever. I don't need anything from you. She was almost at the grand front door when a sharp, sudden pain exploded at the back of her skull. She cried out, stumbling forward, her vision blurring. She collapsed to the cold marble floor, clutching her head. A small, white golf ball rolled to a stop a few feet away. She looked up, dizzy, nauseous. Leo was leaning over the second-floor railing of the game room, his indoor golf club still in his hand. There was no remorse on his face, only a cold, assessing curiosity. Daniel had finally turned. He looked from Leo to Evelyn writhing on the floor. He exchanged a long, knowing look with his son, a look that said, there she goes again, the performance, the neediness. Get up, Evelyn, Daniel said, his voice bored. You're not fooling anyone. He turned back to the television. Leo disappeared from the railing. Evelyn lay there for what felt like an eternity. The pain was real. The nausea was real. The cold floor against her cheek was real. Their indifference was the most real thing of all. Slowly, agonizingly, she pushed herself up. She grabbed her suitcase, and without a backward glance, she walked out the door. She took a cab to the nearest urgent care. A concussion, the doctor said, mild but to be monitored. The fever was high 102.5. They gave her fluids, painkillers, and a stern lecture about resting, dossed up. She caught a bus heading out of the city. The urban sprawl gradually gave way to rolling hills and patchwork fields. 2 hours later, she got off in a small town that time seemed to have forgotten. The air smelled of damp earth and wood smoke, a scent that unlocked a deep, primal memory of safety. She walked a quarter-mile down a quiet lane to a small, white clapboard house with a wide porch and a lush, slightly overgrown garden. This was her sanctuary. This was where her grandmother, Rose, lived. Rose was in her rocking chair on the porch, shelling peas into a bowl. She looked up, her eyes the same clear gray as Evelyn's, widening in surprise and instant delight. She didn't ask questions. She didn't demand explanations. She just opened her arms. "Evelyn, my child, you're home." Those simple words broke the last of the ice inside Evelyn. She didn't sob. She just leaned into her grandmother's fragile but steady embrace, allowing herself to be held for the first time in years. Inside, the house was warm and smelled of herbs and baking. Rose fussed, stoking the wood-fired stove, pulling out a big pot. "You're too thin, you need feeding up." Soon, the rich, comforting smell of a hearty stew filled the kitchen. That night, in her old childhood room with its faded floral wallpaper, Evelyn slept, not the fitful, anxious sleep of her life in the city, but a deep, dreamless, healing sleep. For the first time in over a decade, she felt her body and mind truly unclench. She was safe, she was home. 2 days later, her phone rang. Daniel's name flashed on the screen. The world outside Grandma Rose's kitchen window was soft with morning light. Chickens pecked in the yard. The air smelled of coffee and bacon. The frantic, high-pressure world of Daniel Shaw felt a million miles away. She answered, "Yes." His voice was crisp, impatient. The CEO voice he used with junior employees. "Evelyn, the silk shirt from Milan last year, the dove gray one, where is it? I have a lunch with the Japanese investors." Her mind, trained over 13 years of service, immediately provided the answer. "It's in your dressing room. Second closet, in the garment bag with the other casual formal wear. It's next to the navy Zegna suit." The old habit of pleasing him, of making his life seamless, was a deep groove. She almost added more, but stopped herself. There was a rustling sound on his end. She could picture him in his vast walk-in closet, a room bigger than Rose's entire kitchen. More rustling. Then a slightly grudging, "Hey Emph," the silver tie with the faint stripe. "The one in the leftmost compartment of the storage unit," she confirmed, her voice flat. "It's a good match." She heard more movement, the sound of fabric. When he spoke again, there was a note of something unfamiliar in his tone, almost approval. "It works. I'll wear it." A pause. "Text me your address. I'll have the anniversary jewelry couriered to you." Isabella picked it out. "But I'm sure it's to your taste." The name, coming from his mouth, was like a key turning in a lock, finally bolting a door she had left open for too long. "No," she said, her voice clear and firm. "Don't bother. Isabella's taste and mine have never aligned." The silence on the other end was sudden and deep. She could feel his shock radiating through the phone. She had never directly criticized his precious Isabella before. "Evelyn," his voice dropped, becoming cold and dangerous. "Don't overstep. You are in no position to compare yourself to her." A faint, humorless smile touched her lips. "You're absolutely right, Daniel. I'm not. So please, don't waste the good jewelry on me. Give it to her." He was speechless. She glanced at the old cuckoo clock on Rose's wall. "I need you to have Isabella schedule our appointment at the courthouse." It was more peace than she'd known in years. A week passed in a blur of simple, healing routines. Helping Rose in the garden, canning preserves, reading old books by the fire. The constant low-grade anxiety that had been her baseline state for years began to fade, replaced by a weary but solid calm. She was waiting at a small, sunny cafe in the next town over for her oldest friend, Maggie, when her phone rang again. An unknown number. She almost let it go to voicemail, but some instinct made her answer. "Mrs. Shaw." "Evelyn Shaw?" A man's voice. Officious and slightly flustered. "Yes, this is Principal Davies from Westridge Academy. There's been an incident with Leo." Evelyn felt a distant ping of something that might have been concern, but it was faint, like a radio signal from a far-off star. What kind of incident? "He was involved in an altercation with another student. He struck him. The other boy's nose is bleeding, and he's quite upset. His parents are here, I see." Her voice was calm. "Principal Davies, as I'm sure you're aware, Leo's father has full custody." You need to contact Daniel Shaw to handle this. The principal cleared his throat, his discomfort palpable. Well, yes, we tried that, but Leo, he refuses to give us his father's number. He insisted we call you. He's quite adamant. Of course he was. Daniel was probably in a high-stakes meeting. Leo knew better than to interrupt that. Mom, however, was always on call, always available to clean up the mess. Evelyn took a slow breath. She saw Maggie's car pull into the parking lot, her daughter Chloe waving excitedly from the passenger seat. Principal Davies, could you please put your phone on speaker? I'd like to address this with everyone in the room. There was a muffled fumbling. Then the acoustics of the room changed. She could hear a woman sniffling, a boy hiccuping, and Leo's sullen, defensive breathing. Leo, she said, her voice cool and clear, devoid of the usual placating warmth she used with him. You hit someone. That is unacceptable. You know that. It's the rule you and your father live by, isn't it? A wrong action demands a consequence. Apologize to the boy and his parents. Now, a stunned silence greeted her words. She'd never spoken to him like this. She'd always mitigated, explained, softened Daniel's harsh punishments. Furthermore, she continued, this is the last time anyone from that school will call me regarding Leo Shaw. His father is his legal guardian. All decisions, all problems, are to be directed to him. Is that understood by everyone? She waited. Yes, Mrs. Shaw, Principal Davies said, his voice faint. Leo, she said, her final word to him on the matter, do not call this number again. We have no relationship anymore. She ended the call. She saw Maggie and Chloe approaching the caf table, their faces bright and smiling. She quickly set her phone to do not disturb and smiled back. A real, genuine smile that reached her eyes for the first time in a long time. Everything okay? Maggie asked, giving her a hug. Everything is fine, Evelyn said, and for the first time, it felt like it might actually be true. She turned to Chloe. Now, tell me all about this big race coming up. When she was pregnant with Leo, she had desperately hoped for a girl, a child she could protect from the cold Shaw legacy, a daughter she could teach to be strong and independent. When Leo was born, she poured all that hope into him anyway. For a few brief years, it had worked. She remembered a tiny Leo, his face crumpled with grief over a dead ladybug in the garden, insisting on giving it a proper burial under the rose bushes. She remembered him, at 5, sneaking a crumpled dandelion from preschool into her pocket, a treasured gift for his mommy. Then Daniel had decided it was time Leo became a man. He'd started taking him to the Shaw family estate every weekend. The tender-hearted little boy began to change. He stopped crying. He learned to mask his smiles with smirks. He came back from visits with his paternal grandmother criticizing the shabby furniture in Rose's house, parroting the old woman's venom. Grandmother says it's a miracle Dad married you, an 8-year-old Leo had once told her. His head tilted in a perfect imitation of Daniel's condescension. She says we have to be patient with you because you didn't have the advantages we did. A forkful of decadent chocolate cake appeared in front of her lips. Chloe was beaming. Try it, Auntie Evie. It's the best. Evelyn took the bite, the rich sweetness a stark contrast to the bitter memory. You're right. It's perfect. Maggie laughed. Ah, you've done it now, Chloe. She's obligated. You know the rule. You feed someone, they have to come to your championship race. Evelyn put her arm around Chloe's shoulders. I wouldn't miss it for the world. The day of the school track meet was bright and clear. The air on the sprawling sports field was electric with the shouts of children and the encouragement of parents. Evelyn scanned the crowd, looking for Maggie and Chloe, and then she saw them. Daniel, looking imposingly out of place in his tailored suit, and next to him, clinging to his arm like ivy, was Isabella. She was dressed in a chic, cream-colored tracksuit, as if she might be called upon to run the anchor leg at any moment. Isabella spotted her first. A cat-like smile stretched across her perfectly made-up face. Evelyn, what a surprise. Leo didn't mention you'd be coming. Her tone implied that Leo's omission was a deliberate slight. Evelyn ignored her completely, her eyes continuing to sweep the field. She wasn't here for Leo. She was here for Chloe. Daniel, noticing her disregard for Isabella, abruptly shook off Isabella's hold and strode over, his expression dark. Evelyn, I thought you made a big production about severing TIs. Here to make a scene? Pathetic. She didn't look at him. Please don't stand so close to me. I'd prefer not to be associated with you. His face registered blank shock. What did you just say? I said, she repeated, her voice even. I don't want people to get the wrong idea. What idea? That we're still together. He stared at her, his jaw working. A flush crept up his neck. You're pushing your luck, he hissed, the controlled facade cracking for a second. Just then, the starting pistol cracked for the junior varsity 400-meter dash. Evelyn's eyes instantly found Chloe, a streak of focused energy in the third lane. And 5 lanes over, she saw Leo. He saw her too, his face, already set in a competitive scowl, twisted into a mask of pure disgust. He clearly thought her presence was an embarrassment aimed directly at him. The runners shot off the blocks. Chloe was a natural, her form powerful and graceful. He reached Leo first, crouching down, his body blocking the view. Evelyn followed at a slower pace, her heart thumping for a reason she couldn't quite name. It wasn't maternal panic, it was something colder, more observational. As she approached, Daniel was barking questions at a flustered-looking medic. The medic opened his mouth to answer, but Daniel held up a finger, cutting him off. He turned his head, his furious gaze locking onto Evelyn, who had stopped a few yards away to send a quick text to Maggie. Chloe was amazing. Silver, meet you at the gate, Evelyn. Daniel's voice was a whip crack, drawing the attention of everyone nearby. What is wrong with you? Your son is hurt. Get over here. She finished her text and looked up. Leo was sitting up now, supported by the medic. His knees were raw and bleeding. His left ankle was already swelling, turning an ugly shade of purple. He was pale, his lower lip trembling, his eyes, wide with pain and shock, found hers. And then, a habit so deeply ingrained it bypassed his conscious brain, his hand lifted slightly, reaching for her. It was a child's gesture, a plea for comfort. Evelyn felt nothing but a distant, clinical pity. It was sad to see any young animal in pain, but this was not her child. This was Daniel's son, under the watchful eyes of students, teachers, and parents. She walked right past the huddle surrounding Leo. She didn't even break stride. She walked straight to the finish line, where Chloe was still catching her breath, her face flushed with exertion and triumph. Evelyn opened her arms. Chloe, you were incredible. I'm so proud of you. She hugged the girl tightly, feeling the solid, healthy strength in her young body. Behind her, she could feel the weight of their stares, Daniel's fury, Leo's dawning horror, Isabella's smug pity. It all rolled off her. It meant nothing. Come on, champion, she said, slinging an arm around Chloe's shoulders. Your mom's waiting. She says seafood, feast or pick. She walked away from the field, from the drama, from the ruins of her old life, feeling lighter than she had in years. She'd just settled into the passenger seat of Maggie's car when her phone rang. Daniel? She ignored it. A moment later, a text flashed on the screen. We need to discuss the divorce. She sighed. At the restaurant, she asked Maggie and Chloe to go on ahead. I'll just be a minute. Order me the crab cakes. She took a deep breath and dialed Daniel's number. It was answered before the first ring could finish. Where are you? His voice was tight, strained, a stark contrast to his usual controlled drawl. That's irrelevant. When is our appointment at the courthouse? He was silent for a beat, and when he spoke again, he'd clearly made an effort to modulate his tone, to sound reasonable. Evelyn, just come to the hospital, County General. Leo's ankle. It's bad. The doctors say he might not run again competitively. There are decisions that need to be made. He needs his mother. She leaned her head back against the car's headrest. That's unfortunate, but it's not my concern. What? The word was a choked gasp. How can you say that? He's your son, Daniel, she said, her voice as calm as a still lake. You stood in your study. You asked him, point blank, who he wanted to live with. He told you, in no uncertain terms, that he was a Shaw and I was an outsider. Why are you now acting as if I'm the one who abandoned him? The contradiction is almost amusing. The silence on the other end was profound. She could hear the hum of hospital machinery in the background. When he finally spoke, his voice was different. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a bewildered, almost plaintive note she'd never heard before. Evelyn, just name your price. Whatever you want in the settlement. I'll agree to it. Just come here. He needs you. I can't. I have a merger closing in Hong Kong in 3 hours. I can't stay here and play nursemaid. A soft, dry laugh escaped her. My terms are unchanged. Sign the papers. As for Leo, my advice, as your ex-wife, is to hire a competent nurse. Something shattered on his end of the line. A cup, maybe, thrown against a wall. His control finally snapped. He is your son. You carried him for 9 months. You almost died pushing him into this world. And you're just going to throw that all away? You want to make him a child from a broken home? Broken, she said, her voice gentle, almost helpful. Daniel, don't be dramatic. You have Isabella. She's always been so invested in Leo's well-being. He's always wanted you to make an honest woman of her. Do it. Make him happy. Give him the mother he clearly prefers. He made a strangled sound. You would be fine with that. You'd be happy to hear him call another woman mom, 100%. She said without a moment's hesitation. The line was quiet except for his ragged breathing. She was hungry. The smell of garlic and butter from the restaurant was making her mouth water. Daniel, if you can't make time for the courthouse by Monday, my next call will be to my lawyer. We'll do this through the courts. She hung up, she turned off the phone, she walked into the restaurant and joined her real family. Monday came and went, no Daniel. So she made the call. She hired the best divorce attorney in the state. A ruthless woman named Sheila Jones who had a particular fondness for humbling powerful men. Evelyn handed over everything, feeling a weight lift from her shoulders. It was no longer her problem. Weeks passed in a peaceful rhythm at Rose's house. The sharp edges of her pain were slowly sanded down by simple labor and unconditional love. One weekend evening, she and Chloe were walking back from the far field, their arms laden with vegetables for dinner, their faces flushed from the sun and the cool autumn air. Auntie Evie, look, the sky is on fire, Chloe gasped, pointing at the spectacular sunset painting the clouds in shades of orange and violet. Evelyn stopped and truly looked, really saw it. For the first time in over a decade, she'd been too busy managing a billionaire's life to notice the sky. She put her arm around Chloe. It's beautiful. Come on. Let's go see what magic Grandma Rose has worked up for dinner. They pushed open the creaky screen door, laughing, ready to present their harvest bounty. The laughter died on Evelyn's lips. Rose was standing just inside the door, her hands wringing her apron, her face a mask of anxiety and confusion. Evelyn followed her gaze into the small living room. Leo was there. He was perched awkwardly on the edge of the floral sofa, his crutches leaning against the armrest. A small duffel bag sat at his feet. He looked smaller than she remembered, paler. The haughty arrogance was gone, replaced by a bewildered vulnerability that made him look his age. Rose, who sent Evelyn shaky text messages every month asking for new pictures of her great-grandson, knew exactly who he was. She knew, with the deep, unspoken wisdom of her years, that something was terribly wrong. Grandma, Evelyn said softly, her voice calm, why don't you and Chloe take these beautiful veggies to the kitchen and wash them for dinner? We'll be in a bit. Rose nodded, her eyes sad. She reached up and gently brushed a smudge of dirt from Evelyn's cheek, a wordless gesture of solidarity. Before shepherding a wide-eyed Chloe out of the room, Evelyn turned to face her visitor. What are you doing here, Leo? The question hung in the air, stark and unwelcoming. He flinched. His fingers began to pick nervously at a loose thread on his jeans, worrying it until the skin underneath turned red. It was an old anxious habit. The old Evelyn would have rushed to him, taken his hands, soothed him with silly stories until he smiled. The new Evelyn just watched, waiting. After a long, uncomfortable silence, he spoke to the wall, unable to meet her eyes. My ankle, the doctor said. The recovery would be better, faster, if I had proper care. The lie was clumsy, pathetic. She sat down in the rocking chair opposite him. I know your father put you up to this. Don't worry. I won't inflict my presence on you. You can tell him you tried. No, he said, the word bursting out of him with surprising force. He finally looked at her, his eyes wide. It was my idea. I wanted to come. She studied him for a moment. It doesn't matter whose idea it was. The result is the same. The court gave your father custody. You live with him. You are his responsibility, not mine. The panic she saw flood his eyes was real. But, you're my mom. When she didn't respond, his voice took on a desperate, legalistic tone. It doesn't matter what I said. Biologically, legally, I'm still your son. Yes, she said quietly, you are. She let the words hang there for a moment, then asked, do you remember last year? Your award ceremony for the science prize? A shadow crossed his face. He remembered. The school had called her, specifically requesting that she, the mother, present the award, terrified of embarrassing him, of not being enough. She'd spent a small fortune on a new dress and had her hair and makeup done professionally. She'd been so nervous, so proud. She'd walked into the auditorium, beaming, heading straight for his homeroom teacher, and then Leo had appeared, not with his father, but with Isabella. He'd stepped between Evelyn and the teacher, Mrs. Henderson, he'd said, gesturing to Isabella with a proud smile. This is my mother, Isabella Shaw. The teacher had looked confused, glancing at Evelyn's clearly mother-of-the-groom outfit. Leo had followed her gaze, and his own face had contorted into a mask of pure contempt. Oh, her. That's just Evelyn. She helps around the house, cooks and cleans. Sorry about the outfit. She doesn't know how to dress for these things, doesn't know her place. Isabella had swept onto the stage, accepted the award on his behalf, and posed for photos with him, her arms possessively around him. Daniel had that photo framed on his desk, in Rose's quiet living room. Leo's face lost all its color. I know you've always been ashamed of me, Leo, she said, her voice devoid of accusation. Simply stating a fact. You made it clear you believed I wasn't good enough to be your mother, so I'm going to make this simple for you. I am not your mother. You are not my son. You said it yourself. You're a Shaw, I'm not. We have no connection anymore. She stood up and walked to the front door, holding it open. You should go. And don't come back. This house isn't for you. He stared at her, his body trembling. He didn't move. A stubborn, entitled anger flickered in his eyes. Fine, if words wouldn't work, action would. She strode back across the room, grabbed the collar of his jacket with one hand and his duffel bag with the other, and hauled him up off the couch. Mom, stop. My ankle, it hurts, he cried out, genuine pain and shock in his voice. She ignored him. She half-dragged, half-pushed him across the small living room, through the door, and onto the porch. As she was about to shove his duffel bag into his arms, Daniel emerged from behind the large oak tree at the edge of the property, his face ashen. His voice, when he spoke, was uncharacteristically shaky. Evelyn, for God's sake, he's been having nightmares. He needs you. Can't you just let him stay? Just for a few days? No, she said, the word flat and absolute. It was then that Leo saw Chloe peeking curiously from the kitchen doorway, his face twisted with a fresh, petty jealousy. Why can she stay? He demanded, his voice cracking with indignation. She's nobody. I'm your real son. Evelyn looked down at him, her expression one of pure, unvarnished disgust. Don't you dare compare yourself to her. Chloe is family. She can stay as long as she wants, forever. If she likes you. She leaned down slightly, ensuring he heard every single, perfectly enunciated word. I don't want you. The moment you chose your father, you stopped being my child. Leo stared at her, his mouth agape. The boy who had been taught from age 7 that tears were a sign of unforgivable weakness, began to cry. Silent, shocked tears rolled down his cheeks. Daniel, looking utterly lost, moved to help Leo up. He couldn't meet Evelyn's eyes. How can you be so cruel? He whispered, the question sounding feeble and pointless. Evelyn's answer was to close the door. She slid the old iron bolt across it with a heavy, final thunk. Later that night, a storm rolled in. Thunder shook the little house through the rain-streaked window. She could see the dim outline of Daniel's luxury sedan still parked on the muddy lane. She saw Rose, concerned, getting a blanket and a flashlight, ready to brave the weather. Evelyn intercepted her gently at the door. No, Grandma, she said, her voice soft but firm. She took the blanket and led the worried old woman back to her bedroom. They made their choice. They don't get our comfort anymore. She went to her own room, where Chloe was sleeping over. The girl was stirring, frightened by the thunder. Evelyn climbed into bed beside her and gave her a pair of earplugs. It's just noise, sweetie. It can't hurt you. Go back to sleep. She put in her own earplugs, listened to the muffled silence, and fell into a deep, untroubled sleep. The next morning, the pounding on the front door was frantic. She could hear Daniel's voice, strained and desperate. Evelyn, please, he's sick. He's burning up. He was vomiting all night. Evelyn lay in bed, listening to the rain tap against the window. Chloe slept soundly beside her. She rolled over, closed her eyes, and went back to sleep. When they finally emerged around noon, the car was gone. The sun was breaking through the clouds. Evelyn felt a lightness in her chest. She took Chloe out to the berry patches, teaching her how to find the ripest, sweetest ones. When she dropped a happy, fruit-laden Chloe off at her dorm later that week, she was mobbed by her friends. Whoa, are these blueberries? They're huge, so much sweeter than store-bought. My Auntie Evie used to be a PhD candidate in agricultural science, Chloe announced proudly. She knows all about the special soil for these big North American varieties. Nobody else around here has them. The other girls looked at Evelyn with newfound respect. Could we come visit sometime too? To see the farm? Evelyn smiled. Of course. Anytime, as she walked back to her car. The setting sun painted the long campus walkways in gold and red. Agricultural Science PhD. The title felt like it belonged to another person, a ghost. 13 years ago, she'd been that woman, smart, driven, he'd sworn that once the child was older, she could go back, finish her degree, do whatever she wanted. The years bled away. Leo started school. When she timidly broached the subject of returning to her studies, the Shaws had been unanimously horrified. A farmer? Daniel's mother had sneered, digging in the dirt. What would people say? It's common. Even Leo, parroting his grandmother, had told her, Dad says you got lucky marrying him. You shouldn't rock the boat. Her phone buzzed, pulling her from the bitter memory. Daniel's name flashed on the screen. She looked at it for a moment, then calmly tapped the button to block the number. Her lawyer could handle him. She had a life to rebuild. In September, a hurricane skirted the coast, its outer bands lashing the countryside with wind and rain. It was enough to finally compromise the old, worn-out roof on the addition to Rose's house. Evelyn stood with a contractor, assessing the damage. We should just rebuild the whole thing, she said decisively. Reinforce the foundations, make it strong, before construction could begin. They needed to clear out the rooms. She found herself in her parents' old bedroom. It was dusty and smelled of cedar and memories. In a corner, under a pile of old linens, she found him, Mr. Hops. The stuffed rabbit was matted and loved, one ear hanging by a thread. But he was there. Her mother, in the final, pain-racked months of her cancer, had sewn him for Leo's 3rd birthday. Leo had loved him fiercely. He'd been his brave companion against nighttime monsters. A 5-year-old Leo had sobbed when Mr. Hops's ear started to tear, begging Mommy, fix him. Please fix him. An 8-year-old Leo, after a visit from the newly returned from Europe Isabella, who'd laughed and said, what a babyish toy. Boys in Paris play with tablets, had taken a pair of scissors to Mr. Hops, dismembered him, and stuffed him deep into the kitchen trash. Evelyn had spent a frantic afternoon digging through reeking garbage bags at the disposal site, retching and crying, until she found the pieces of her mother's last gift. She'd spanked him that day, the only time she ever had, and made him stand in the corner. He'd never called her mommy again now. She held the carefully mended rabbit, a sad smile touching her lips. She turned to call for Rose, and found herself face to face with a man's chest. Daniel, that looks familiar, he said, his voice uncharacteristically soft. All tenderness vanished from her face. Daniel, do I need to get a restraining order? Will that finally get the message through your skull? He flinched as if she'd struck him. His Adam's apple bob. Evelyn, I know you hate me. I know you never want to see me again. But 13 years, it has to count for something. Please, let me explain. There's nothing to explain. There is. The desperation in his voice was raw, startling. The hotel. You saw us. Why didn't you just call out? If you had, you'd have known it was a client meeting. I can get the security footage. I can prove it to you. He fumbled for his phone, his hands shaking. She watched him, her expression unchanging. Don't bother, she said when he found the number. It doesn't matter. He froze. What? I said, it doesn't matter. You and Isabella are your own business. I don't care. It was the truth. The divorce papers had been printed before the photo ever arrived. The anniversary was just arbitrary date she'd chosen to end things. The hotel was just a convenient accelerant. He stared at her, his confidence crumbling. It does matter. You can't think I'd, but she was already turning to leave. He grabbed her wrist, his grip tight. Evelyn, please, I was wrong. I've already. He struggled, the words seeming to physically pain him. I fired Isabella. I cut all ties. Please, I've never begged anyone for anything in my life. But I'm begging you. Give me one last chance. Don't do this. She looked into his eyes, full of a real, palpable fear she had never seen there before. Her own gaze was serene, empty. Daniel, she said gently, I don't love you anymore. It's over. She pulled her wrist from his suddenly slack grip and walked away. Outside the room, leaning against the wall, was Leo. His eyes were fixed on Mr. Hops in her hand. They filled with tears. That's my rabbit, he whispered. I thought I lost him. You didn't lose him. She corrected him, her voice cool. You destroyed him and threw him in the garbage when you were 8. His face crumpled. Mom, please, I can't sleep. I need him. Give him back to me. He reached for the toy. Evelyn reacted with a swiftness that surprised even herself. She shoved him hard. He stumbled back against the wall, his bad ankle giving way, and slid to the floor, crying out in pain and shock. She looked down at him, her expression icy. "Don't you dare touch my mother's things." A gasp came from the hallway. Isabella stood there, her hand over her mouth. Her eyes darted from a weeping Leo to a stony Evelyn to a shell-shocked Daniel. "My God, Evelyn, are you insane?" she shrieked, rushing to Leo's side in a performative display of concern. "Just because Daniel finally rejected you, you take it out on his son?" Evelyn actually laughed. A short, sharp, humorless sound. The sheer audacity of the woman's delusion was astounding. She walked up to Isabella and without a word, slapped her across the face. The crack was loud in the small hallway. Before Isabella could even process it, Evelyn slapped her again, harder. Isabella shrieked, her hand flying to her reddening cheek. She lunged at Evelyn, nails bared, but Daniel moved between them, grabbing Isabella's arms. "Evelyn, stop, just calm down," he said, but his words were directed at her, not at the woman she'd just struck. Isabella stared at him, her face a kaleidoscope of fury and disbelief. "She hit me. Are you blind? She attacked me. I told you." "You're fired," Daniel said, his voice low and tired. "This has nothing to do with Evelyn. Just leave." "She hit me. And she attacked Leo. How can you defend her?" Leo, struggling to stand, used the wall for support. His voice was hoarse. "Leave my mom alone. It's my fault. I deserved it." The betrayal on Isabella's face was complete. Her house of cards had collapsed. "You're both insane. You're a pathetic bastard, Daniel Shaw, and your son is just like you." She turned and ran, sobbing, down the hall and out the front door. In the ringing silence that followed, both Daniel and Leo looked at Evelyn with a faint, desperate hope. The hope that the old dynamics would reassert themselves, that without the villainous Isabella, the family would magically reform. Daniel took a tentative step. "Evelyn, we drove a long way. We haven't eaten." "I'm fine, but Leo, he's a growing boy. Could you maybe make him some soup? A sandwich?" Evelyn considered it. "Wait outside. I'll bring something." She didn't go to the kitchen. She went to her bedroom, to her dresser. From the top drawer, she took out a document her lawyer had drawn up. It had taken some research. Legally severing parental ties was nearly impossible, but she'd found a way, a private, binding contract that absolved Leo of any future financial or caregiving responsibility for her. If she was cutting him out, she would do it cleanly, fairly. She would not be a burden he'd have to dread in her old age. 2 minutes later, she walked outside. She handed Leo the document and a brown paper bag containing 2 apples and a granola bar. "I've spoken to my lawyer. It's very difficult to legally disown a child in this state," she said, her voice matter of fact, "but this is a contract. It states that upon my signature, you have no future obligation to me financially, medically, or personally. I will not burden you in my old age. Sign it, and we are completely finished." She was setting him free, protecting him. Instead of relief, pure terror filled Leo's eyes. He looked at the paper, then at her. His composure shattered. He fell to his knees on the dusty ground, clutching at her pants, sobbing uncontrollably. "No. Mom, no. Please, I can't. I don't know how to do anything without you. I need you. Please, don't do this. Please don't throw me away." He turned his tear-streaked face to his father, his cries becoming frantic, hysterical. "Dad, you said she was just mad. You said she'd forgive me. You lied. You lied. Tell her I'm sorry. Tell her I'll be good. I'll be so good. Please." Daniel turned away, pressing the heels of his hands into his eyes. His shoulders shook. When he turned back, his face was ravaged. "Evelyn, for the love of God." She cut him off. "Take him home. Don't come back." She turned and walked back into the house. She closed the door and bolted it. In the living room, Rose was sitting in a patch of sunlight, Mr. Hops in her lap, a needle and thread in her hand, patiently darning the old wounds. Evelyn made 2 cups of tea. She handed one to her grandmother, then opened her own laptop. It was time to start looking into reinstating her PhD candidacy. It was time to work. 5 months after the divorce was finalized, Evelyn was picking Chloe up from school. The girl bounced into the car, full of news. "Annie Evie, you'll never believe what happened at school. It's so sad and crazy." "What's that, sweetie?" "That boy Leo Shaw, from the track team, he got in a huge fight with his dad. Someone said his dad drinks a lot now, and during evening study hall, he jumped from the 4th floor window. He's in the hospital, in a coma. They say he might not wake up." Chloe chattered on, annoyed that the ensuing school-wide mental health assembly had cancelled her precious art club. Evelyn listened, her hands steady on the wheel. A distant, quiet sorrow moved through her, for the boy he had been, for the man he would never become. But it was a sorrow for a stranger. She reached over and gently tucked a strand of hair behind Chloe's ear. "Listen to me, my little treasure," she said, using the Chinese term of endearment she'd adopted for her. "Life is long. Everyone makes mistakes. The important thing is to be brave enough to start over. There's always a way forward. Promise me you'll remember that." Chloe nodded, her young face serious for a moment before she snuggled against Evelyn's arm. "I'm not scared of anything. Not with you and Mom." "Good," Evelyn said, her heart full now. "Where are we going for dinner?" The city lights glittered around them as she navigated the traffic. The road stretched out ahead, leading anywhere she wanted to go. She was finally in the driver's seat. That's all for today's story. Thank you for listening. This is my channel. The tales I share, drawn from life or woven from imagination, are meant to offer you connection, reflection, and perhaps solace or newfound strength. If you long to see your own reflection in others' journeys, or seek a glimmer of light within the maze of emotions, subscribe to my channel. Listen with your heart. Explore the stories of life.